So this video is going to dive into a little more detail on how you configure the routing page and all the different features there. Again, we'll keep it sort of high level and dive into more weeds in subsequent videos. So just focusing on this routes panel, the first area is just figuring out what routes would you like to load into memory. The architecture here is there is a server that's running on the routing device itself that is somewhere on your boat, and then you are viewing this web application over your boat's Wi-Fi. And you can view the application on any device that has a browser. And of course, on the browser, on the device that is using the browser, we do use the GPU to accelerate rendering and certain calculations, but it's expected that there's going to be a range of different devices that are viewing the web application on the network. So it's important to understand how do you get rid of data that you don't care about, both for the performance of your browsing experience and the device that's using the browser, but also for the performance of the device that is hosting the application and running the routes. And this import filters section is your first line of defense to unload and get rid of, not necessarily delete, but just not load into memory any data that you don't care about. So one thing you'll notice is you can turn on and off certain routing configs if you, for whatever reason, let's say you're routing multiple courses, or there's just different configs or different boats or whatever, you can hide routing configs that you don't care about. You can do the same thing for weather models, both the traditional and the AI weather models. So you could say, the Fuji model, which is an AI model, has not been performing well for me lately, so I just want to unload all of the routes that were routed against that model. Similarly, you can do the same for boats. Of course, you might have different configurations, different routing configurations for, and by boats, we really mean polars here. You might have a performance polar or, a night polar or whatever, and you can just load and unload different, and of course, competitor polars, things like that. So this allows you to just unload any polars that you don't care about. All of the routing positions have lots of metadata associated with them. So at a particular position on the route, you have a VMG and a COG and a SOG and various other parameters, variables. And when memory gets tight, you may want to unload some of them. So for instance, you may be doing an analysis and all you really need to look at is the VMG, and you're looking at just thousands and thousands of routes, and so for performance you turn off all properties except VMG. You can do that here as well. So and with all of these you can search for what you're looking for. You can find it quickly. I don't know why VMG is not showing up, but that's just the demo. Let's see. Yeah, maybe VMG isn't in the list. But in any case, the idea is that you should search for the properties that you want, search for the boats that you want or the models that you want, and it lets you find them quickly so you can turn them on or turn them off, and they'll load, whether they're enabled or disabled. We also have filters both for the model initialization date time and the departure date time. And so, for instance, you might want to use this by saying, let's say, okay, it's 19 Zulu on April 17th. I would like to not see anything from models that ran before 12Z on April 17th. And so you can use this init date range filter to unload old routes so that they don't appear. And you can do the same thing with the departure time of the route as well. So you can see here, we have loaded 272 routes out of a possible 1,100 routes, just based on our import filters. The next section is visibility, and visibility is very similar to the import filters. The only difference is you're just making things visible or invisible. And again, I'll skip through some of this, but you can turn on only certain boats. You can change how you want boats to appear, how you want their lines to render. And one consequential thing here is for the different boats, whatever color they are assigned, you're going to see that color manifest in other places in the app. And so if you, this boat in different places and features will always be this color. And so you can change the color of a particular boat. And you can see, for instance, up here on the left in this list of all of the specific routes that we have loaded, not all visible, but they all have a color and that corresponds to the color of their boat. So with all of these things, you can hide everything, you can show everything, and the corresponding views update as well. And so this is your second line of defense for performance, for making things sane, for finding the data that you're looking for, only showing certain things, etc. And we can also do that for weather models. Again, you can search for the weather models that you want to turn on and off. We can also do that for init times. So maybe I want to have all the data loaded, but I actually just want to hide today is the 17th, and so maybe I just want to look at data from yesterday. I can quickly and easily do that. The other thing I'll show is with these visibility features, you can solo things. And so by soloing, not only can I, for instance, I can hide all, and I can turn on all routes for the boat, for this particular boat, but I can show all boats now, and I could also just solo that boat. And so when you solo something, you temporarily hide everything that isn't that thing. And you can solo for boats, you can solo for routes, and you might say, well, that's great, but this is a list of hundreds of routes. How do I know what route I'm actually looking for? So the other feature that's really useful is if you're if you just click on a route, this is something I didn't cover yet with the tooltips, but you just click on a route, and on the left you see it's just going to scroll to that route. And so if you have, let's say, this route, you want to solo it, you can solo it, or you can hide it. And so that's just an easy way on a route by route level to just clean things up, hide things or show things that you care about. The other thing I can show here with the loaded routes is you can group them. And so you can group by boat, for instance. So these are all the routes for each boat grouped together. And you can group them by boat and model. So now every unique combination of boat and model are grouped together, and that makes searching and finding routes easier. So that's the visibility panel. Now there's custom variables. Custom variables, there's a lot of information in these routes, but we can't think of everything. And so the custom variables give you a way to define custom variable for routes as a whole. It can apply to the route. So for instance, you might want to handicap time, and that would just be the total duration of the route, plus or minus some handicap factor that you define. But you can also provide custom variables for the positions in the route. And so, for instance, time to finish might be, you might do VMG divided by distance to the next mark, right? But you can define whatever definitions of these different variables, and then you can color code and plot and visualize your custom variables as well. The edit section is another performance-focused feature. This is in recognition that you might have tons of routes and it gets bogged down, and you might want to keep everything visible. It might not be the case that you are able to unload the routes from the import filters or turn them off using the visibility settings, but you might want to still do some analysis, but you need to lessen the amount of data that you're data crunching on just for the performance of the application. So what this section lets you do is it lets you both sample and simplify the routes so that all the calculations are happening using a smaller amount of data. Sampling is just taking a subset of the routes in a particular, so if I've got 100 routes on the boat, or on the route, and then I sample the routes, maybe I only end up with 10 positions on that route, literally just taking a sampling of the routes. Simplification, so you can see if I crank this up, you can see my routes are, if I really crank it up, they become useless, but it's just literally removing positions from the routes. Simplification, and simplification happens after the sampling process. So unlike sampling, sampling just arbitrary takes a sampling of the positions. Simplifying, it uses an algorithm that tries to preserve the shape of the route. And so if you have a lot of positions in a straight line, and then you've got, let's say, 5, well, I can just try and find one that to showcase it here. So let me just quickly turn on positions here. We'll get into all of this. Then I can crank up simplification, and you can see simplification it's removing positions, but as I crank it up, it's trying to keep these positions over here and these positions over here because they're resulting in changes in course. And so simplification does also remove the number of positions, but it tries to preserve the overall shape and leave important positions in place where there's a change in the shape of the line. And you'll see at the bottom here, if you have either sampling or simplifying in place, it will tell you that whatever you're doing, whatever analysis you're doing, whatever view you're looking at, it's not using all the data available to you, just so that you understand you're just looking at a subset of the data. And you can always hit the reset button and get all your data back. Now we have the timeline settings. The timeline settings are really useful because without the timeline settings, you're looking at a spatial view that represents a large range of times. Obviously, it takes many days to cross the ocean, and so even though I have my timeline and my timeline is set to a particular time, my view is quite a large range of times, and so I can use the timelines settings to restrict the rendering of the data to just the time that I care about. So first I'll turn on restrict to timeline, and you can see now my routes only show all the data up to wherever my current timeline indicator is. And so this is just useful for understanding how things evolve. The other thing that we can do is we can turn on a time window, and this is a slice of time. And so this is really useful because still without the time window turned on, you don't really have a sense of what happened at the same time. For instance, I don't know necessarily when these events happened in relation to these other events. Of course, I can follow the front and slide back and forth and figure it out. But if I'm trying to look at some stuff over here, I don't really know how they relate in time. And time window gives me that ability to understand events that are happening at the same time. And I can decide, do I want the selected time, is it the center of the time window, the start, or the end of the window? You can see the graphic updates on the timeline, and I can also choose the size of the time window that I care about. We also have tools. So this is sort of things that don't fit anywhere else. So for instance, we have dividers here that tell you, your distances for things. We also have this brush tool, and the brush tool, it's just sort of an experiment, but the idea is you can use it to magnify, you can use it to erase things and just look at the map underneath, and you can use it to define a particular layer that you might want to just render on top of. So for instance, this is our H3 layer, and I know I haven't gone over what that is, but this just shows you that you can use the brush tool to partially render different types of layers and change the size of the brush tool to whatever you need it to be. One other way that you can make your view a little simpler and understand what's going on is by using the favorites. And so favorites is just a way to collect different routes and show only those routes. So you can do it one by one. I can add each route independently, add a couple routes over here, and you can see they populate over here on the left side, and then I can click solo, and now I'm just looking at my favorite routes. But I can also grab them with a bounding box, and so if I just want to grab these, I can add those. If I want to just grab these routes over here, I can add some of those over like this way. And now when I solo, again, the all my favorited routes are just in the solo, and then I can just clear them if I want to get rid of them. That brings us now to the layer panel. I'm not going to go through all of these right now. They will have subsequent videos. But the main thing I want to stress is all of these layers respect the timeline settings. They respect the the visibility settings, hiding and showing, favoriting, whatever. Whatever your view is here is gonna, or whatever your visibility settings are, it's gonna be respected by all of these layers. And so just as an example of that, I can turn on, for instance, we can turn on this H3 flow. We'll turn off this layer. I know I didn't tell you what the flow layer does yet, but we'll just play around with this flow layer. We will restrict to timeline. We will add a time window. And now as I move this around, you can see my flow layer is respecting the time window as well. So it's just important to understand. Usually there's multiple ways of hiding and showing things. There's multiple ways of combining these tools together, and everything just works together to respect the settings in the various places. Another thing I can call attention to is in routes. Route is just visualizing all the individual routes, and every other layer here is some type of spatial or temporal aggregation and visualization. And so, for instance, by that, what I mean is this is the heat map layer. It is aggregating all of your positions for all of the routes into a heat map. I showcased the flow layer. Here's another flow layer. Similarly, this is not showing you individual routes. This is showing groupings and clusters of routes aggregated together. So you're pretty much, if you're looking for groupings, aggregations, spatial statistics, you're looking at all of these from H3 stats down. And if you're just looking at the raw route data by itself, you're in this routes panel. The other thing I can call attention to is we have a special panel layer here called app performance. And this is, things are slowing down and you just want to see like how much are they slowing down. And it's a debugging tool, but it also helps you understand, you got to turn some layers off or simplify some routes. And it just gives you your, how much memory is being used and frames per second and just the load that the web application is taking on your local device. Let's see. There's another important thing that I'm not going to dive into a lot of details here. We have an analysis panel, and I think this is probably the other most useful thing besides the actual visualization. I'm not going to go through this in detail. This will get another video, but this is where you actually find your opportunities for winning the race. And there's just all sorts of features within this, and that's accessible via the analysis toggle in the routes layer. I'm going to skip over polars because this is, to be honest, it's not where I would like it to be as a feature, but the idea is this is where you're editing your polars and saving polars and creating them. This is probably where sale plans are going to go. This is just your polar management. And then weather, I'm going to make a separate video as well, but weather, the idea is this is where you visualize weather, and the weather will respect the timeline. So I can give you just a quick maybe just a quick intro to the weather layer here. So first of all, you can see when I select a model, it shows up, pardon the lag. This is one thing. Obviously, ultimately, we want it to be really responsive. I just haven't spent the time to get it there yet, but it will get there. And let me just see if we can get something to show up here. Oh, that's why, because color shading is off. Okay, so if I turn on color shading, there we go. Yeah, so now you can see we're showing wind speed rendered on top of everything. We've got also the mean sea level pressure. That's also available. And you can see down on the timeline, you can see the available times that we have to show the, what the forecast covers, the various times that the forecast covers. We also have this feature where we can turn on highs and lows. So it is a little bit slow just rendering everything, but I just wanted to showcase that that's where we're going. The other thing I can show you with this is we do have a comparison mode. And so comparison mode allows you to compare multiple models. And so first of all, you'll see all of our views are totally synchronized. And wherever I put my cursor on one panel, it appears on the other panel in the exact same position, the exact same lat long. And so this allows us to do analysis. And each one of these panels can have its own independent forecast that we choose. And it will render the views. Again, the performance here is not where we want it to be, so I'm not going to wait for it to render everything. But I do want to showcase this is where we're going. And you can add as many views as you want, and so we could really crank it up here. So it's gonna choke on me, but let's just give it a second and see how it does. I've successfully had up to 8 views here working. So well, as expected, the performance here is not what I hoped, but I do think it's important to showcase the direction that we're going in, and the UI that we aspire to have is the ability to have 8, 9, whatever different forecasts up and visible. Bear with me. Let me just give it a second here. Okay, one other thing that I'll show is there is this charts feature, and I don't think it's loaded the data yet, but the idea with charts is it loads the time series for any of the models that you have visible. And then the other thing that I'll show is you can turn off the synchronization of the pan and zoom, but you can also turn off synchronizing the forecast time. And when that's turned off, you now see in all your views independent timelines. And so this allows you to compare different forecast times. I'm not sure immediately the use case for this. I would think that you primarily just want to look at the same valid time of the forecast across different forecasts. But if for whatever reason you want to have different times on different models that you're looking at simultaneously, that is supported. So back in single view, we can turn everything off for the weather, for some performance, and that's basically an overview. And in future videos, we're going to dive into the weeds on, we'll dive into the weeds on the routing layer and all the options here. We're going to dive into the weeds on this analysis panel because there's a ton of amazing options and features in the analysis panel. And then we'll also dive more into the weeds on these various other visualization layers. Thanks for watching.